Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the witnesses coming today. Really important topic, even though it's kind of dense. So, Mr. Levine, I was reading your 10 rules for defense management reform, and I want to look at one of your rules. You list, you caution Congress and the DoD from taking on too much. You list a number of recent major overhauls to include military healthcare, defense acquisition, officer personnel management, military retirement, UCMJ, and you conclude by stating, when you try to attack everything at once, you often end up accomplishing nothing. So if this committee were going to take your sound advice, given the current strategic environment, where should we focus defense reform efforts to ensure we compete most effectively with China and Russia, and we get back to the main mission of the Department of Defense? There's been a lot of talk about some of these, broader issues, social issues, you might want to call them, but I think we have to remember the DoD mission is to protect our nation, to close with and destroy the enemies of our country, if need be, to go and kill the enemies of our country. And sometimes we forget that. What are the reforms you would focus on?
So, First Senator, my rules are a little bit oversimplified. So I'm talking about rules that you can prioritize so you get them up at the senior level of the department and you get your senior leaders to focus on them, which can only be a handful. I would think about a couple of areas. One is the area that sort of the advanced kinds of skills that we need for new warfighting, whether it's cyber, AI, software. Those are things that we are increasingly reliant on, and we're deficient in skills. And I would look at that as being a major priority for the Department of Defense. We need to reform the way we need to reform the way that we access those skills and the way we treat those skills, so that we can build them into the workforce and make better use of them. The second thing I would worry about is data. We've got reams and reams of data in the Department of Defense. We've got all kinds of data that could be incredibly helpful to us, and we're not able to access it in an effective way to make decisions. I think that those two things would be right up at the top of my priority list, Senator.
Okay. I'm going to ask this question for all three witnesses, and I know you've already talked about it, but it's such an important issue, and I think it's such a strategic disadvantage relative to China in particular, but it doesn't need to be. And that's in the area of weapons systems reform, getting new platforms. We've all heard the kind of parade of horribles. Senator Tillis, I'm surprised that he didn't pull out his 450-page RFP for the next pistol, literally, a 450-page RFP for the next generation of a handgun. I mean, you can go and buy a handgun off the shelf that I think would be fine, whether it's the F-35, taken 20 years to develop. I know we've already talked about the Ford-class carrier. But then you have other instances in U.S. history. I forgot the development time frame of the SR-71, the Blackbird, the spy plane, but I know it was very, very short. So what can we do to address the giant challenges that we have in developing weapon systems that take years, if not decades, and certainly disadvantages us relative to China?
I think one of the key things that needs to happen is to get out of the business of bringing on or starting new acquisition programs without having sound business cases in place from the beginning. And so we often see in acquisition that the requirements simply don't match the resources. It's a fundamental problem. I'm oversimplifying it, but that is a key piece of it. And the result, of course, is that more programs are started than can be executed, buying power is reduced, performance is reduced, delivery is delayed. And so bringing more discipline to the upfront piece of the acquisition process is critical.
Great. Any other witnesses on that?
Senator, I think that recognizing that different markets are different, that acquisition is not all of one piece. So the example you gave of handguns is obviously a crazy thing because handguns are out there. There's no revolutionary handgun that the Department of Defense is going to invent that's vastly superior to what the commercial marketplace is producing. Aircraft carriers are different from handguns. It probably takes 10, 15, 20 years to field your next aircraft carrier, and you're not going to short-circuit that by running a competition faster or something, because that's the development cycle. Software is completely different because it's largely commercial. We need to be able to respond to each of these areas in different ways depending on what the market is and what the competitors look like.